And coming up next, we've got a fantastic piece with the star of the show, Mr. Peter Gamble. And I'd like you to welcome Peter's sister, Susie, to the stage. Hello, Susie, and thank you for that giant box of films that you sent all the way from Mansfield.
Oh, it was a pleasure. It's amazing how much space I now have in my wardrobe.
Yes, yes. So we were talking about a couple of things, and the main one I guess we were talking about was that Peter was a very passionate tram fan.
Absolutely. From pram to tram.
From pram to tram. And one of the things, as soon as the first film I pulled out when Susie sent a big box of films down for me, first I had to get this projector and a couple of others to play them and remind myself how to use them. But the first film that I put on featured a W-class tram, and I'm also a huge tram fan. So I knew that something had aligned in the universe. But tell us about Peter. Peter, he was a radio announcer, he was a children presenter and a tram driver. He had passions in all three of those areas, Susie.
He certainly did. And firstly, I really must apologise for the craziness of his alter ego, Benji Bunny. I'd hate to sort of go to my grave as being Benji Bunny's sister.
Well, you've said it now, so it's out there.
But no, I don't think Peter would have been able to present what he has here had he not had the alter ego. He was basically a very shy person. When he was on the television, being himself, he wasn't as relaxed as he was when he was doing this sort of crazy stuff for the kids. And it was the same as when he was a tram driver. He started out like everybody as a tram conductor, whereby he had interactions with the public. And that didn't sort of bode too well with his shyness. And once he became a tram driver, where he was sort of shut off, he was, and plus the golden voice, he'd announce all the stops. He'd go every morning to work looking like something out of the bandbox. The hat, the badges, the shoes shone.
A couple of days ago, Susie put a picture of Peter on a tram and he had the microphone in front of him as the tram driver and he looked like he was about to do some announcing.
Yeah, he was one of the only ones in the Melbourne tram family that actually did that announcing. He was proud of it. He loved the trams, but he also loved the history of wherever he lived. And he lived in Ballarat for a number of years and became a personality.
Did you ever watch him on the TV in the 70s?
No, unfortunately we didn't get BTV6 in Melbourne, but he hooked up an old radio where my mum could listen to him when he was announcer on 3BA. Right. And sometimes he'd get himself into strife. He'd play a record, say, for the want of something. He'd play, say, AC/DC or whoever. And halfway through he'd say, right, that's enough of that. It'd stop and he'd say, that was bloody awful. And people used to complain. They said, please don't talk over the records. But he spoke his mind and he had a lot of opinions that a lot of people didn't agree with, but he was passionate.
One of the big things about the legacy that Peter's left us is we are trying to track down, in lieu of there being no dates on any of these films, exactly when this happened. Now, my detective work and talking to a few ex-BTV6 employees is that it can't be 1971 because there's a feature on the brand new Ballarat bus system. And of course, it was the end of 1971 that the trams went. So the brand new bus system was something he featured, meaning it had to be 1972. There's also some footage of the Ballarat railway precinct where the tram tracks are gone, and some brand new tracks are going across. Did people know that within 24 hours of the trams closing, the Victorian Railways removed the tram and railway crossing so that it was only a railway crossing? 24 hours and they got rid of it. In the footage, you can see it's brand new concrete. So there's another feeling of mine that it's 1972. But you weren't quite sure when he worked at BTV6, were you?
It was the 70s. It's a very broad
Yep.
time
The other bit of
frame.
detective work I've done is there's a brand new, one of the new Z-Class trams he features on one of his films, and it was a prototype and it was about to be rolled out, and it didn't happen until 1973 that it went into service.
Oh, okay.
There's also a colour film of Peter interviewing Ron Barassi.
Oh, right.
Beautiful
Yes, yeah.
colour, 16 millimetres. And that might place it at 1973, 74. So we're calling it 1972 until we have other information anyway.
Well, I'm glad it's you doing the detective work and not me. Because
I have enjoyed so much, Susie, and we want to thank Susie, don't we, for getting this box down to Ballarat and digitising it, because that's why we're all here. So thank you, Susie.
My pleasure.
Bit of a highlight for Susie and for all of you, our first sound film from the collection. It was one of the first ones that I saw also. It features Peter interviewing, I think it's Ron Green. Is it Ron Green? Ron Green, who's the proprietor of Green's Pies. He'll tell you all about it. And I forget whether it's Stephen or Greg. We've got Greg, who's here in the audience. He's in the film as a pie maker. So a round of applause for Greg, who's here, watching himself make pies. Thank you, Susie, so much.
Thanks,
We're
Rex.
honouring Peter's legacy, and I can't wait for you especially. Part of the reason we're all here is Susie just wanted to look at the films and see her brother, and I was there to help. Do you know what I mean? But as I'm looking through this footage, I've gone, the whole world has to see this. So thank you, Susie, very much.
My pleasure.
And hope you can make it for our second screening as well.
I certainly will, mate.
You're going to push that out of the way. I'm going to
am.
fade the lights and we're going to have a look at Green's Pies, 13 Main Road in 1972.
If you happen to be walking along Main Road and you get as far as number 13, chances are the smell of cooking will waft by your nostrils. And that smell is coming from this unassuming little shop known as Green's. Green's are purveyors of pies and pasties to the populace, and we're going to find out how they make their pies and pasties and other assorted goodies. Come with me. Behind the scenes, the first person that we should meet is the man who owns the business, and that is Mr. Ron Green. Hi, Mr. Green.
How do you do, Mr. Gamble?
How long have you been making pies and pasties?
Well, this particular firm has been going since 1939. I personally have been in the business since 1960.
And your pies and pasties are entirely handmade, aren't they?
That's right, yes.
Which means they're different to the big companies. In what way?
Well, the big companies have a machine in which they put their raw ingredients, and from there they're all stamped out. Their formulas must remain constant, and they're all mass-produced. Whereas in our case, everything is laid out. Our formulas can be varied because we handle the pastry, the shells differently, and then they're hand-filled so that our quality is maintained by our own rigid standards.
What goes into a Green's pie?
Well, our pastry, our actual formulas are somewhat not exactly a secret, but they are closely kept. But
Why?
well, there have been over the years a number of different ones that have wanted to try and copy them. But for this reason and obvious reasons, we've kept the actual formula itself to ourselves. But the pastry is just a short paste that we make, a formula that we've used exclusively right throughout the time that we've been in business. And then the filling for a pie is basically minced beef, seasoned, cooked and thickened to the required consistency, then put in the shells and baked.
It must be a pretty good formula if people try to steal the secret.
Well, it's one that I don't think I've seen duplicated anywhere as yet.
Pies come in for a little bit of criticism every now and again. people say that they're not really very good for you. There's not a lot of quality in them.
This is a mistaken impression because the pie has been viewed by many as being just a cheap meal, whereas actually the meat content of a pie must contain 25% by weight, and this usually averages out in an average 6-ounce pie, which is the pie you would normally buy, works out at close to 2 ounces of meat. Not quite, almost 2 ounces of actual meat in the pie. And compare this with some other foods, and there's certainly the nutrient value there.
A hot pie is Australia's national dish, isn't it?
Well, it has become that, yes.
What goes into the pasties that you make?
Our pasties are vegetable, principally vegetable and meat and seasoning, and they're encased in a pastry casing and baked.
And you also make sausage rolls?
Yes, a limited number of these. They're not a big demand item, but that's simply just sausage meat encased in pastry.
And do you just sell your pies and pasties and sausage rolls at this shop, or are they sold at other places too?
Principally here. There are a few places throughout the city that do sell ours, but they're only just in a few strategic points.
Aha. Now, you haven't started baking yet, have you?
Not as yet.
Not as yet? Right, we're going to watch the process and see exactly what does go into a famous greens pie.
Very good. Here they are laying out the tins ready to put their pastry on. This is the basis of the cases that form the underneath part of the pie. Now we lay these out 4 wide, and we have a total of 8 dozen down the length of the table here. The reason we have it 4 wide, that's the width that we roll the pastry, and it also conforms to our cooking trays. And 8 dozen just fills 4 cooking trays, which is 2 oven loads.
I see. These fellows here who actually help you make the pies, what qualifications do they have?
Actually, in the actual pie manufacturing, it is not an apprenticeship trade because it's only a portion of pastry cooking. But these chaps that I have with me have been with me for a number of years and have learnt our particular system of making pies and pasties and have worked well into the system, and well, they know our routine and work accordingly.
I guess if you didn't have the pastry, the meat would fall all over the place, wouldn't it?
Well, this is right. At this point now, the chap here has kneaded down the pastry into a rough oblong shape, and he starts to put it through the machine for rolling it out. Certainly saves a lot of hand rolling.